Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to you all from either locally or around the world in attendance for the first of 10 career webinars that Selborne College will be holding as commemoration of our 150th Jubilee celebration. It is wonderful to have a number of panelists with us who are experts in their respective fields in education, and I will introduce each of those panelists one by one once the previous has finished their presentation. I'd like to start this evening by introducing you first of all to Mr. Alan Miles, who will go first. Mr. Miles was the head prefect of Selborne College in the year 1999, and he started his career of teaching at Selborne College before moving to a professional rugby career at the Lions. He then returned to education to St Andrews in Grahamstown as the head of rugby, and he subsequently completed his teaching degree. He is currently an educator at Grey High School in Port Elizabeth. Alan, very welcome, and I hand over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Jewett. I must be honest, when I first got the email request to join this webinar, it came as a bit of a surprise because I didn't feel that my sort of journey meant so much importance to really honoured to be able to take part in the webinar and share some of my thoughts when it comes to education. Like many jobs, there are many rewards in education, and something that really resonates with me is the sort of to have a job where you can actually have an impact, you know, and be able to inspire people's lives on a daily basis. You know, that's really a massive reward to be involved in a profession like that. The memories that come with the time that one is in education is also always something special, and I know some of my fondest memories go right back to those Selborne days, and I know there's a lot of Old Selbornians out there that had a lot of fun, you know, in our classes that we had, and in particular a lot of the sports that I was involved in and coaching with water polo and rugby, and we had a lot of fun. And those connections that you're able to make as an educator, you know, on the sports field that carry over the classroom, you know, is really very, very special. You know, and I know a lot of Old Selbornians out there that I'm still in contact with. You know, we really were able to make some really good connections, and they're lifelong connections. You know, and there's not many professions out there in the world where you can actually have a connection like that you can create. Being married to my wife, who's also an educator, the lifestyle, obviously, you know, being both educators and having a family, you know, we wouldn't change our careers for the world. You know, it really, the lifestyle really suits, you know, a family. So it's really special, you know, being in the profession and being able to raise a family, you know, and makes it a lot easier as being educators. I know from a sporting point of view, I've been able to really, you know, see a lot of the world, you know, through the schools that I've worked at. I've been able to, I was very fortunate when I was at Selborne, you know, to get to Hungary on a water polo tour, and at St Andrews I've toured Argentina, Zimbabwe, so you really get good opportunities from a sporting point of view as well, which is also a very wonderful thing to be in the profession. And then of course, unfortunately, with most jobs, there are challenges, you know, and something that I think is a sort of bit of a challenge at the moment is sometimes parents have sort of unrealistic expectations placed on their kids, and that can be unfortunate, you know, and you know, to be able to manage that is always a concern and a challenge as an educator. And I think being a parent myself, you start seeing education, and in particular the sport in education, you start seeing it from a different viewpoint, which is also something interesting to have a look at. Technology and the rapid growth in technology is always going to be a challenge as an educator, and I know there's that saying, you know, adapt or die. You know, as an educator, you have to keep on adapting, and I think with the recent sort of the COVID that we've had and how technology, we needed to use technology as educators, that was a massive challenge for, you know, for some staff, and a lot of teachers have grown quite a lot, having been able to get pushed into areas where they weren't very comfortable. So that's also been something really special, and has been a challenge, and been able to grow there as well. The biggest thing also, I think, from a sporting front is a lot of teachers today, they don't want to give up as much time anymore in the sports. And I can remember, I know Mr. Jewett, you shared a bit of my journey there. And I often was led by my other passion, and in particular being rugby, and that really did put a bit of a delay, on my studies. So that's why I always say I was a mature student. And a lot of younger staff now that go in the profession, they don't throw themselves into the schools that they work at, and they don't really give up of their time, which is an expectation as an educator. You really have to get involved in every area that you can within a school. And I think that is more and more important today. You become part of that family of a school, and you can't go into education thinking that you can get out of certain commitments. And I know for a lot of, I'm sure a lot of schools are faced with that challenge from a staffing point of view, that they really got to make sure that their teachers are involved, and you really have to just buy into everything that school has. Something else that's quite interesting is from a motivation point of view, the sort of new thoughts when it comes to motivation, in a work environment, is the real motivators today are being able to have autonomy, and also to be able to have a certain amount of creativity in your positions. And as an educator, you obviously have a certain amount of autonomy in the classroom, and you really can be creative, and that's what makes the profession really fulfilling, and a reason why I would encourage guys to really look at it as a profession going forward. And yeah, I hope to listen to the rest of the panelists, and I hope to add value with the question and answer session later. So thanks very much.
Alan, thank you very much. Giving us some insights into your career in the high school education sector. Yeah, I really appreciate your input, and I'm sure there'll be a number of questions that might be posed to you a little bit later on. I'd like to move now on to Mr. Abu Machaya. Abu matriculated at Selborne College in the year of 2004. He completed his Bachelor of Education degree through the University of Fort Hare. He's passionate about cricket, has been a manager and a coach for both border schools at under 15 and under 17 level in the cricket teams, and he's currently an educator at Selborne Primary School here in East London. Abu, I hand over to you, sir. Sorry, Abu, we can't hear you. You seem to be muted. Sorry, Abu, we seem to be having a problem with your audio. I wonder if the technicians can get to you. I'm going to move on, Abu, and hopefully they can help sort it out for you. So sorry about that. Can we move on to Mr. Max Norman? Max is a recently retired deputy headmaster of Selborne College, and he served for just over 40 years at Selborne College, which is a phenomenal achievement for any educator. And he's also a mathematics educator and a math specialist. Max, although he's retired, we have managed to secure his services to continue teaching a few maths classes at Selborne College. And Max, Mr. Norman is going to have a chat to us about the parallel opportunities that lie within the education, particularly at high school level. Mr. Norman, over to you. Sorry, Max, you're also muted.
Am I now unmuted?
Thank you. Yes, you are.
As a school-based educator, my first priority always had to be the learners for whom I was responsible. There was, however, time to build a parallel career in assessment. This started with the Old Cape Education Department, but the most rewarding time professionally was in the 90s, when I got to meet colleagues from all the old departments, and together we set about preparing the curriculum, setting the papers, and marking them for the first ever grade 12 exams conducted by the new East Cape Education Department. This was an exciting time as we were breaking new ground and building confidence and trust in us, in one another, and in the new department. Although I've retired as a classroom teacher, largely, this part of my career continues, and last month I visited marking centres as an external moderator. I was impressed by how the quality of marking has improved over the years, and by the hospitable way in which I was received. I believe that matric marking is the most effective in-service training there is for teachers in our country, and I would urge all matric teachers to get involved. I certainly learned a lot from my involvement. One of the things I learned is that a teacher's subject knowledge, it's not sufficient to be able to deal just with how issues, but one should also be able to deal with why, what if, and is there a more efficient way type issues. The Selborne class of 2021 certainly demanded this, because they asked searching and insightful questions each day. Their results confirmed them as one of the best ever, and their messages of appreciation made their teachers feel that all the hard work was worthwhile. As a teacher, one tries to build the ability of learners to deal with changing fortune. And one does this in the classroom, in sport, societies, assemblies, and yes, even bus trips. This hopefully helps the learners to, once they go out into life, become more successful. The rewards for teachers, what are they? I think daily laughs and brain exercise. Each day, a learner or a colleague does something funny or asks a question or raises a matter for discussion, which exercises one's brain. Alan mentioned entry to special venues. I well remember a day in Cape Town when a Selborne victory in a rugby tournament in the morning could be celebrated by sitting in a box at Newlands in the afternoon and watching a Super Rugby game. Then a sincere, like we just had after the matric result, sincere thank yous from learners really do, as I mentioned, make one feel that it's all worthwhile. And watching previous old boys, previous learners, watching their progress is also great fun. And that's one of the purposes of these webinars, to expose what old boys are doing to the current learners, because it certainly will inspire them. And finally, I must say a big thank you to past learners all over the country, because they always take trouble to walk across an airport departure lounge or whatever, just to say hi to a former teacher they recognize. Thank you.
Very much, Mr. Norman, and very insightful. And I'm sure there'll be questions posed for you a little bit later as well. We're going to try and go back to Abu now. So Abu, I believe it's all been sorted, the technical glitch. So I now hand over to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. To begin with, I'd like to start off with this quote from an unknown author. You grow up so fast in high school. It is not something you wait for. It is just it just kind of happens. One day you will look back and be proud of who you have become. But at the same time, you will miss who you were, as from an unknown author. Well, As Mr. Jewett said, I'm Abu Machaya, currently teaching at Selborne Primary, grade 7 teacher. Teaching, sure. I have a passion for cricket, but teaching just came for me naturally, I guess, in the sense that it's a calling. It's not an easy job. People might think that we have all these holidays. In particular, being fortunate to teach at a school like this, we play derby days, go away on weekends. But it's a lot of admin, a lot of paperwork you have to get through, a lot of papers. That's what I've learned in my short career. But for me, the most important thing is, and the joy that I get from teaching, is when I stand in front of the class and I see all these eyes looking at me and waiting for me to give knowledge to them. And I have to be mindful of what I say, because then these young men look up to me and they listen to me. And for me, that is the most satisfying feeling ever, being able to make a difference in one young man's life. So I've taken this journey, and for me, I've tried to build or groom or teach learners who are holistic. In particular, for us at Selborne Primary, for me to teach young gentlemen who will play a huge part in our society and be pioneers of the current situations we are in. Because in this day and age now, we have what we call the fourth industrial revolution, which mainly some people, in my view, I think they see it as technology. But for me, the most important thing about the fourth industrial revolution is a means of putting a whole lot of people together who have their certain skills and abilities and being able to share information amongst each other to achieve a certain goal. Because nowadays, people tend to keep information to themselves, and that delays the process of progress. That's my point of view. So for me, the fourth industrial revolution, yes, it has made the world a smaller place in the sense that we can do what we're doing right now, but most importantly, we have to share information. Because knowledge is powerful, knowledge is key. And that's one thing I think no one can take away from you, your knowledge. And it opens up so many opportunities, and you can literally go anywhere in the world. So for me, teaching has had its ups and downs. With COVID coming up, as a teacher, as a young teacher, yes, all the sport has been taken away. We've had to play different roles. For example, become policemen, police the learners. Have you got your mask on, sanitize, social distance, and so forth and so on. So that has been I think it should be included in one of the roles and responsibilities of a teacher and included into that piece of literature. But with that said, it has also played a big impact on the mental state. I don't think people realize how much teachers have been affected with COVID and all, because then you are required to be at work every day, hours or longer, and things are happening at work and also in your personal life that you have to deal with, but you just have to keep on moving and no one is there for you. And as a result, I think most teachers have suffered mentally during this time. So I would like to say to all teachers that have been teaching, in particular these past couple of years, I take my hat off to you, big ups to you. It has not been easy. We've all had our challenges, but keep going for the future of our country. And yes, in closing, I would like to quote a professor of mine, Professor Okeke from University of Fort Hare. He once said, "Success equals hard work, discipline, and diligence." Just to elaborate, for me, success, you can't measure, because then we all have our own goals and dreams. So success is different for everyone. But in order to be successful, you have to work hard. You have to be disciplined. in the sense that you have to know what you want to achieve, and you have to be diligent, meaning you have to keep on going, keep on persevering. So success is hard work, discipline, and diligence. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for those words, and particularly your parting words on success and what it means to different people. Thank you very much for that. We'll now move on to the next panelist. This panelist is the recently retired headmaster of Selborne College, Mr. Sammy Kunene. Sammy began his journey at Selborne College in 1993 up until the end of 2014. He was educated at Queen's College as well as at Rhodes University. He then took a number of roles of educator at schools such as Rondebosch, Queen's College and Grey High School before he accepted the role of headmaster at Selborne College. Sammy Kunene is also an extremely passionate athlete and athletics coach, and we hand over you to Sammy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you for the invitation to be part of this wonderful initiative. Max, well done. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and how appropriate that education should be the first webinar. My little blurb is really quite personal, so here we go. In the mid-1960s, a young matriculant, enthused by his father's career as a pilot in the South African Air Force during the Second World War, made his way to the Military Medical Institute in Pretoria to undergo tests to become a pilot, so he thought. His father wasn't particularly keen on this idea, asking his son why on earth he wanted to be a bus driver in the sky, and strongly suggesting to him that he should consider a plan B. Unable to meet the stringent eyesight requirements of the Air Force, a very disappointed young man returned home and began to pursue plan B, a career that his headmaster had mentioned in passing in his matric year, and one that his father thought was a much better idea, teaching. Over the years, as the young man matured and his career unfolded with its vast array of wonderful human experiences, he came to acknowledge that his father was quite correct, and he was very grateful that his headmaster had planted that seed that led to a lifetime in arguably the best profession of all. Sadly, many young people choose careers for all the wrong reasons. There's glamour. My dad's a brain surgeon. There's wealth. If I become a CA, it's a direct route to a fat bank balance. There's status. I see myself as a hotshot trial lawyer. And they often find themselves in a career that is not in sync with their personalities. And while they may achieve career goals and dreams, they're not entirely satisfied with life because of the conflict that exists between their basic persona and what they do for a living. Equally sadly, becoming a teacher is seldom high up on the list of career choices of young people. The career carries little status these days. It certainly doesn't make any millionaires, and it is no place for the faint-hearted. If you pursue teaching wholeheartedly, it is extremely demanding. However, teaching can be rewarding, just not in material ways. There are many ways to succeed as a teacher. You can give a good lesson, coach a successful sports team, implement a new system in a school that works, help a teacher team to complete a project or achieve a goal. You can focus, affirm, energize, calm, and even save young lives. In teaching, there's plenty routine. There are bells, timetables, syllabuses, year plans. But as a teacher, you always need to be prepared for the unexpected, and that will always be driven by the pupils. Dull humdrum is simply not the stuff of a teacher's world, particularly if your career is child-centric. Positive feedback is not an everyday occurrence for a teacher. However, like the rare diamond, when it comes telling you that you have made a difference in a life, The emotional boost can carry one for days, weeks, months, years, and even like the James Bond film, forever. So what can you look forward to if you become a teacher? You can look forward to plenty mental stimulation in areas that actually interest you as you grapple with better ways to teach a lesson, coach a sports team, produce a play, manage a project. There are also these wonderful opportunities to impact the lives of young people at highly impressionable times in their lives. What a responsibility, what a privilege. Teaching, I believe, not everyone will agree with us, and looking at our hair, you would perhaps say, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I do think teaching keeps you mentally, physically, and emotionally young because you're working with young people and you attune to that level. That's very exciting in my view. You also can enjoy lifelong growth with and in the interests of young people in your subject, in educational practice, and in administration and management. The life of a teacher also presents wildly varied opportunities and challenges. As an academic in your subject, in the extramural sphere, and in management, where you can be called on to head up a subject department, control a sport or a society, a grade, an administrative entity in a school, or even a school itself. And then tuning into something that Alan said, I do believe that teaching does lead to a richer family life because you are plugged into the rhythms of the school along with your children. And those of us who are my age will have many fond memories of the quality family time that was enjoyed in school holidays. I also think that security in the career and in the income that it generates, not much, but it's there, is something that's very, very real in teaching. There will always be a demand for teachers. In conclusion, I'd like to just remind folk that school is a preparation for life, and therefore any good school will strive to give its pupils as wide a variety of experiences as possible, way beyond the classroom. As a teacher, you can enjoy stimulation from being a creator and a driver in this incredibly rich environment. What better? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sammy. Really appreciate those words, and yeah, some tremendous insight into a career of a young man from pilot to educator to mentor. Thank you very much, Sammy. Our final panelist this evening is Professor George Errod. Professor George Errod matriculated in the year of 1972 from Selborne College. He then read for a bachelor's degree at Rhodes University and completed that in '76. And then he furthered his studies, completing his PhD degree in the year of 1994. George is widely recognized as one of the South Africa's finest educators, spending most of his career as a professor at the Rhodes University. I hand over to you, Professor Errod.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and lovely to be here. Good evening, everybody. Molweni nina nonke and nant almal. I'm also proud to be representing the centenary matrics today, and you can see the class of '72 here. Yes, good to be here. Thank you for the invite. I'm honored to be here. We're amongst with the old school and with old friends. I'm also pleased about the topic for tonight, career in education, and not a career in education. I have a soft spot for verbs rather than nouns. Maybe because my experience as a human being is that being is a verb, not a noun. And so with career, I really like the idea of career as a doing word and not a thing. But if you look in the dictionary, the verb career means to hurtle along, somewhat out of control. Now, I actually quite like that because a career is a way of being. It's a way of living, not a destination, a place, or even an institution. And also this being in control story. I think rather we're called to be searching, open, growing co-authors of our destiny. And then we come to education. I also like the idea of education as a doing word. Not a thing, not a place, not a school even, or even a university. Yes, those are great places where education can and should take place, but it can happen anywhere. And indeed, I've been to schools and seen teachers who do little to no educating. And at other times, I've been thrilled to see parents, artists, psychologists, laborers doing wonderful educating. So if you're interested in working, creating spaces, relationships, opportunities for people to learn, to grow, to develop their potential, to become bigger people, that can happen anywhere. Yes, it can happen in schools and universities, but it can happen in any profession. And if you do choose this way of careering along, you will indeed have one of the most rewarding and fulfilling lives. Now, I'm not, as I get older, I'm less and less keen to tell other people what to do, because I have enough of a struggle just trying to manage my own life with a reasonable degree of responsibility. But for the sake of this webinar, I've jotted down 10 points that I've certainly learnt in my career, and which I think might be useful to others thinking of working in this particular way. Number one, education is learning how to think, not what to think. And in fact, you're going to help people to develop answers that are different to yours very often. Number two, getting to know yourself comes before getting others to know anything else. Your needs, your assumptions, your expectations are not neutral. And in fact, they can get in the way for others. Three, keep growing yourself if you want to help others to grow. The bigger you get, the more others are able to grow and develop in your presence and in your influence. Number four, the truth is bigger than us. We argue to interrogate the truth, not each other. Number five, learn to trust the process. There are bigger life forces out there that are better than us and better than our often obsessive need for control. Number six, life is bigger than your job. Get perspective. Get your thrills and your spills, your inspiration, your affirmation elsewhere. Number seven, forget the imperative to be normal. In fact, remember, normal is only normal because not enough of us have had the energy and the courage to make the abnormal normal. Number eight, do things because of who you are, not because of who others are. You need to listen to your own angels, and in particular, live according to your own agenda that you've carefully worked out with your mirror and with your God. Number nine, be compassionate. Every day, ask yourself, if I were accused of being loving today, would there be enough evidence to convict me? Not intentions, not feelings, evidence. And lastly, number 10, learn to live powerfully with doubt. Nothing I've said this evening is necessarily true. There are no formula. And you need to be comfortable with discomfort and doubt. And yet at the same time, holding dear to that which you currently hold as true and that you found works for your humble, searching soul. Pele pele gansomi. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. Some inspirational words there. Really appreciate that. To all five of our panelists, what a tremendous contribution that you have made to this first webinar that kickstarts our 150th Jubilee. I'm now going to move into the second phase of this webinar, and that is a question and answers based process. And I will then ask Loyiso in the back end if he has any questions that have come forward.
Mr. Jewett, nothing at the moment. I'm waiting for hands.
Wonderful. Maybe I can ask the question. I know that we've got quite a lot of experience and also a bit of youth on this panel. Abu, obviously the younger of the five, moving through the ranks to yourself, George and Sammy. The question that's always been posed in education is this whole idea about holistic education. And I think for all of you, in some way or the other, you have touched on sport, you have touched on classroom, you have touched on human being relationship building, etc., etc. And technology has also created its own challenges with regards to relationship building by doing online teaching and learning, which may have broken that barrier a little. From the five of you, and feel free to answer, I have two thoughts. Number one is, what are the challenges in education, particularly in South Africa, possibly around the world, where too many youngsters seem to be focusing on one aspect of their schooling instead of developing a broader global holistic approach to their education, to develop their characters, to develop their persona, number one. And secondly, what is the impact that technology over the last 2 years has had on education? And are there any ways forward to try and alleviate the pressures on the social skills of youngsters as a result? Sorry, quite a lot to think about. Are there any thoughts from any of the five panelists regarding that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind starting while everyone collects their thoughts there. I think it's so important for a child today. I mean, if I use an example, when I left school, I didn't plan to go into education, become an educator. You know, and as a schoolboy, the only place where you can really explore clubs, societies, the only place where you can really play two sports, for example, at a relatively decent level will be when you're at school. So kids should definitely, when they're at school, make the most of the opportunities that are there for them. And, you know, I touched on that one challenge where the expectations are sometimes unrealistic for children. And it's because, you know, they get pressurized to sort of specialize when that education at school level shouldn't be about specialization. And I think, you know, we're partly to blame as well that the kids sort of feel this pressure to specialize, but they don't explore everything that's really on offer, you know, and that's what they need to be encouraged to do. I mean, I know my own kids, I'm going to make sure that whatever they're interested in, that I'll keep pushing it. You know, you don't want kids to put themselves in little sort of categories and not, you know, pursuing everything that's there for them. With COVID, you know, nothing beats being in front of a teacher. Nothing beats class time, you know, and that sort of relationship that you can develop with your teacher and the feedback that you can get, the instant feedback by being in a classroom setting, you know, nothing beats that. And unfortunately, with COVID, you know, there's massive gaps in kids' self-esteem, and, you know, it hasn't been able to be built up by teachers because of COVID. So, and I think when kids were given the option to maybe go online or not come in, you know, nothing beats FaceTime in the classroom. And I think we've got to get back to that as soon as we can.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Sorry, Max, you must unmute.
Right, I think I'm unmuted now.
Yes,
I'd like to comment just something on technology. I mean, I've only, since retiring, I've just taught basically one class, and that's coincided with COVID. And something that's really impressed me is WhatsApp. I find in my subject, you've often got to explain things. In a normal classroom, someone puts up his hand and you sit next to him and you explain something. You can't do that anymore because of COVID. And in a sense, WhatsApp replaced that. Many WhatsApp messages were asked with questions. Sometimes one could delay answering a little bit just to give them a bit more time to think about the answers themselves. But in a way, I think the WhatsApp was a really effective replacement for that personal interaction where where a learner's personal or his specific problem could be addressed in the subject. So that's something that I think I learned from COVID is just how valuable WhatsApp can be. And I agree with Alan about the learner's self-esteem that you could build. Often one of the academic performance is improved if they simply are more confident about what they're doing. So sometimes people are so scared of making mistakes that they don't actually know their answers, and they should, because that's how one learns. And something, another area like sports and making a mistake in a match and just carrying on can teach you that skill.
Oh, thank you, Max. Any other input from other Abu? Yes.
Well, teaching the young ones, grade 7, I mostly teach history. History wasn't a subject that I did. So being a teacher as a constant learner, so I had to constantly learn about how to teach the subject, and in particular in these days and times. And what I got to find is that to answer the question of being a holistic learner, especially in the society and country we live in, we don't know, like, we are losing our roots. Basically, we are losing where we come from. I believe that we are all African. Yes, the past has happened, but it stays there. But we can't lose who we are as a people. We are also Africans, and I feel that we must learn from each other, in the sense that I was taken aback the other day when I asked learners, first speaking learners, what are your clan names? And for example, they weren't aware of what their clan names are. And then, moreover, I enjoyed the question the English speaking learner posed to me was that, what are clan names? So to me, that was important in the sense that he wanted to know more about another person and another side. And for me, I believe that is very important. Getting to know each other from a deeper perspective of who we are as a people. Because then, at the end of the day, we have to respect each other. Cultural values, our religious values, and our beliefs. But we can't take this for granted, because then we don't know what that person is going to, where they come from. So I would encourage Selbornians to go to a person that you would think about talking to them, and then just go to them and just ask them, hello, who are you? How are you? Your background, and you might be surprised, you might find a friend for life. And then with regards to the technology, someone is a Google school, so most of the learners have Chromebooks. So most of our teaching is Chromebook based, in the sense that we use Google Classroom, slides. The boys know how to operate the system. Yes, I don't think that's bad, but I think also they can't use the ability to be able to write. I think technology should be used as a way of communicating, yes, but also as a way of gathering information, gathering and sharing information. I mentioned earlier of it becoming fourth industrial revolution. I think technology should be used mostly as a resource of whereby learners use different sources and they go out and gather information and they inquire and they learn by themselves, whereby the teacher poses a question and the learners go out and they gather information for themselves, and the teacher just facilitates. That's what I believe technology should be used for. So, yeah.
Mr. Jewett?
Thank you, Abu. Yes, sir.
Just before you go on with the panelists, there is one hand raised by Songas Mabete, and then on the chat, there are a few questions. So I don't know whether you want to go around the panelists again, or you want to shoot straight to Songas' question and then respond to some of the questions on the chat.
All right. I just want to have a look and see, Loyiso, in terms of the chat. Are you able to see those questions? Would you like to introduce those questions to the panelists? I can't see it at this stage.
Sure, no problem. So
Thank you.
The first one is from Tembelani Mniki. Not a question, but simply an appreciation for the teachers that guided many of our lives to the points they've reached today. Good to see Mr. Miles involved, even though he supports a school named after a color now. So I don't know whether Mr. Alan Miles wants to respond to that.
You're on mute, Al.
You're on mute, Alan.
No one can really tell who I really support, eh? Only I know who I support.
All right, awesome. Then the next question / comment is from Greg Liefeld. Good evening, gentlemen. Thanks for the really thoughtful reflections. Listening to Mr. Machaya talk about some of the COVID impact and Mr. Gunn reference responsibility beyond subject matter teaching. And with so many cues, IQ, EQ, SQ, etc., now in play, how is the role, responsibility of educators relative to parents and society at large, potentially looking to abdicate some responsibilities being impacted? Know which panelists would like to take that one?
Would anybody like to respond to that question?
Can the question just be repeated? I didn't quite hear it clearly.
Okay. Let me. Is the audio fine? Can you hear me clearly now?
Yes.
All right. Good evening, gentlemen, panel. Thanks for the really thoughtful reflections. Listening to Mr. Machaya talk about some of the COVID impact and Mr. Gunn reference responsibility beyond subject matter teaching, and with so many cues, IQ, EQ, SQ, etc., now in play, how is the role, responsibility of educators relative to parents and society at large, potentially looking to abdicate some responsibilities being impacted, as far as I can see?
Yeah, Andrew, I think you maybe need to answer that question as the incumbent headmaster and the two teachers who are currently practicing. I would simply comment that ideally one should never abdicate any responsibility, because as a teacher you don't know when an opportunity will present itself to do all kinds of different things with youngsters. Again, you've got your sort of focused, concrete job to do in the classroom and extramurals, but I think it's particularly in the extramural sphere that you get closer to the kids and opportunities do present themselves where you can do wonderful life skills and emotional support type work. I wouldn't say one should ever abdicate anything, regardless of the pressures that are clearly growing in the modern world.
Samuel, I agree with you, and thanks for passing the buck a little bit. And I would probably agree with that. I think, as educators, it's so crucial that we have a partnership with our parents, because ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to work together to mentor, to encourage, to support, and also educate the young learners today. I think also over the last 2 years, a lot of the social challenges have been exacerbated. I think families are under immense stress and anxiety, not only worrying about the COVID impact, but also the impact that has been made on them from a socioeconomic perspective. And as we know, for many families that find themselves in those situations, it creates its own issues. I think for us as educators and schools, our responsibility certainly would run concurrently with parents, but important to make sure that when the learners do come onto the campus, they feel appreciated, safe, and they have all the opportunities that are available to them, and also you provide them all the different cues, particularly the AQ, where one needs to develop the ability of resilience and character building through times of adversity. And I think that's so important. It's not only about the content, it's not only about teaching and keeping within rules and regulations, but it's about developing the inner person. You can then take those learned skills from educators and parents into the world to stand on their own 2 feet and also face the challenges that come about their way. And I also agree, Sammy, that no one should abdicate any responsibility. The responsibility that you hold might vary, but you need to still assume responsibility in whichever form you're able. So I think that's crucial. I'm not sure if there's anybody else who'd like to add to that. I mean, George, I know you've been around and you're also a professor of education. You might have some input. I'm sure you share a lot of this with your, or have shared a lot with your students before.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, just briefly, I think we must be careful of this, what we call binary way of thinking. It's either one thing or it's the other. And you know, let's go for and rather than or. And I totally agree with much of what's been said. We share, we have a shared role in educating children. It's parents and teachers. I've always been disappointed when I've seen PTAs in schools. And I thought, wow, what a wonderful opportunity for parents and teachers to look at how they can complement each other and helping their children grow up. And instead they have, you know, tea parties and raise funds at cake stalls. And I think we need to look at how we work together, because we share a common goal in this, in terms of what we want to do with our kids.
No, 100%. Any other comments from any of the other panelists? Loyiso, would you like to add another question to the panel?
Sure. A question for Mr. Matt Norman. Was mathematics a strong subject of yours when you were at school? Did you always know you wanted to further your career in mathematics? From Janet Hensberg.
Yeah, I think my answer to that would be a simple yes. I enjoy maths. I still enjoy solving problems. That's fun. I always make a point of trying to create new problems, because it's just something I enjoy, the actual subject itself. And yeah, so it's just been a lifelong passion of mine.
I'll put in a quick punt for maths and maths. Mathematics is one of the most valuable subjects that has helped me in writing PhDs and academic work. And the reason for that is that you never jump a step. If you're developing an argument, you go carefully, step by step, and logically develop something in order to come to an answer. So maths goes way beyond so many of the professions that we think of in maths and that, and it's just a really valuable way of thinking. So Max, good on you, buddy.
Yeah, Sammy, also I'd like to add, you know, I mean, just doing maths. Someone said you've got to fight with the problem. So I think one of the basic lessons simply that a learner's got to have before they go off for extra lessons or anything like that is simply accept being prepared to fight with the problem. Because when you fight with it, you learn how to solve it. And I think that's preparation for life as well.
Mr. Jewett, a bit of pressure from one of the panelists who's had his hand raised for long. He's sending me WhatsApps, and that is Songa Mabete. I don't know whether you want to just change a bit and go to the questions or continue with the questions on the.
Yes, Loyiso, carry on. I can't see any of those questions on my screen.
All right, sure. A question from Darius Stradon. Are you able to teach without a teaching degree?
You can teach life skills, and you can simply make an impact in the lives of youngsters. I think some schools could probably take you on in some capacity in a school, but I think ultimately you need to have some qualification in education in order to be a professional in your field, and also to be appointed by a school's governing body or by an education department. So yes, you will need to get your degree and in order to become a fully qualified educator.
Right, Mr. Jewett, next question.
Can I make
yes,
a comment?
Yes, Sammy?
For me, that's quite an interesting comment, and I'm looking at the faces around me. I'm looking at Ellen right next to me and George right under me. And one of the things that I found mildly frustrating as a headmaster was to try and persuade what I perceive to be serious teaching talent to do the necessary hard yards academically and professionally to get those pieces of paper under the belt. I always, and I still do, George must comment when I'm finished, please, feel that that is critical. It's a discipline. Some people might say it doesn't make a great teacher, and I've had enough experience in my time at Selborne to have seen many wonderful teachers who were wonderful teachers before they got their qualifications. But I still think it's critical that that happens. And Alan today is a much better teacher because he's got those qualifications. And when he helped us out at Selborne for a long, long time without them, he did make a seriously positive impact. But you still need the pieces of paper. George.
It's more than the pieces of paper. They help you answer the questions why and not just the how. And one of the things that concerns me about schooling very often, it's immediately, how do we do this? Rather than stopping and just saying, well, why? What are we trying to do? Why are we doing this? And only once you've got a clear answer to that, are you able to look at how one goes about it. You know, so every single practice has theory behind it. And it's not just theoretical, it's something that underlines we never do anything by accident. We do something because we believe it is the most appropriate thing. Well, what is that based upon? It cannot just be a feeling or a flimsy thing. So there's huge potential value. I think people can be good teachers without the qualifications. However, we can all surely be enriched by having a bit of a bigger understanding about what we're trying to do, so that we can better serve our youngsters and give them a better chance and try and meet them where they're at.
All right. Mr. Jewett, just conscious of time, I think if we can have maybe one or the last question, but I do want to give an opportunity for Spongezo, who's raised his hand. Maybe the second last question from Matthew Hall. What does it take to be an educator at Selborne? Maybe one of the panelists or yourselves can answer that question quickly. Then we ask Spongezo to ask his question.
So the first part is, what does it take to be an educator at Selborne?
100%, Mr. Jewett. Yes, that's correct.
Well, it's going to take a lot of courage, I think, first of all, because you're dealing with young boys, teenagers, who are there to challenge you, and they will challenge you. You're going to need a strong sense of resilience, because it's not going to be easy. I think one of the things that I learned as an educator when I first started at Selborne, after coming from a co-ed school, was that during the months of January and February, it is the toughest time to teach in an all-boys school, purely because of heat and humidity, as well as the fact that they'd been playing soccer or touch rugby on the fields at break. And when they came into class after break, you need to be able to adapt and show a little bit of flexibility. Instead of just trying to teach content, they are certainly not listening to you anyway. So then comes the sense of humor. You've got to have a sense of humor to be able to be a really good educator. And sometimes you need to just accept the fact that boys are going to go off the topic, and you need to go with it and have discussions outside of the content of the work. And I think I think every school will have educators who have really established themselves as quality schoolmasters or quality school mistresses, because they have the ability to adapt, they're flexible, they have a sense of humor, they're able to communicate with children outside of the subject content. I think you need to be passionate about children. If you have a disliking to dealing with teenagers at high school or little ones at primary school, it's probably not a career that you need to go into. And I think every school expects an educator to be involved in their co-curricular program, and you need to be able to put yourselves out there. When I first started teaching, one of the things that I noticed, particularly in the staff room, is that if the headmaster ever posed the question, is there anybody who would like to help driving a bus because we have the staff member who is absent and they need to get to a sports fixture or a chess tournament or something like that, you would have no less than 5 to 8 people putting their hands up and said, yes, I'll help, yes, I'll help. And to me, that is what it's all about. It's people who are willing to go out of their way to get the best and to provide the most for the children that they're in charge of. I think that would probably, all of that sum up into a quality educator. And those are the people, and I'm looking at some of them on the screen, that the boys or girls would catch you in an airport around the world and say, wow, sir, you remember me, thank you so much. And so that would be my thoughts about being a really good educator and what it takes to be an educator at Selborne College and probably all schools around the world.
All right, thanks, Mr. Jewett. And last question, Mabetse.
Thank you, Mr. Mabetse, difficult as that may be to say. And thanks for calling me out. You're getting the chicken wing for dinner tomorrow. Good evening indeed to everybody. It felt like 1999 all over again. Mr. Norman, Mr. Gunn, those many assemblies, even Alan Miles at some point took to the stage once or twice. So it was really good to be 15 years of age again. George mentioned that earlier on. A comment, a question, please. I think I appreciate your referencing to mistresses, Mr. Jewett, and I think I really would have appreciated seeing maybe 1 or 2 lady teachers just to get the female perspective of being at an all-boys school, of which many of us were shaped by. So perhaps for the subsequent 9 webinars, that is something certainly to look into. That's one. About teachers being tangential persons and going off topics, there were no better exponents at that than my Monday morning first period English class with Mr. Kevin Taylor. Mr. Taylor, what do you think of the Springboks? What do you think of the Lions? That was our English lesson. And it was absolutely wonderful. And I think Mr. Wetmore as well is well known for that, and may his dear soul rest in peace. And I think it might also just be a good time to pause and reflect on a life well lived in the teaching fraternity. But a question probably to Mr. Jewett, because he's the one who is seized with what I believe is a looming challenge or problem. East London as a place is under serious threat from the administration of how the city itself is run. 2002, 2022, 20 years on, those are 2 different places, especially for one who hasn't been to East London in a long time. None of the challenges that I'm going to refer to are probably anything to do with you, but in large respects, you have to respond to that challenge. If I may put my neck on the line and say, outside Selborne schools, Clarendon schools, Hudson and Stirling, East London has a serious challenge of what would retain people in the town as a town. So if you were, for instance, to uproot these schools that I've just mentioned, there'd be very little left of East London, and it would be a serious challenge. I'm sure the governing body, the PTA, the school itself has at least considered the fact that given the decay in the administration of the town, this invariably invites certain problems that the school would rather not deal with. I'm interested, if I'm a parent in 10, 15, 20 years from now, what is it that Selborne would offer that would allow me to overlook some of the challenges of East London, the town? So compelling a case Selborne Primary or Selborne College would be, because I mean, they offer the best schools in the country. There are no 2 ways about that. The lived experience of a teacher and pupil in East London is far greater than that of somebody in Johannesburg. The schools are very much still attractive. Unfortunately, they're not exactly in attractive environments. Mr. Dew, I'm interested in your thoughts in that.
Thank you, sir. It's good to see you, Mr. Norman, albeit looking a little aged.
Mr. Bebete, thank you so much for posing that question to me. I would probably answer it in so many different ways. I think for most places around the world, around the country, we've been affected by administrative challenges. I think certainly in London we are grappling with challenges with regards to our infrastructure, roads, gutters, etc. Robots that aren't working at times. But I think the crux of East London is not so much about the road or the gutter. It's more about the kind of lifestyle that I think a lot of people look for. You know, you've got magnificent beaches. You've got a coastline into the Transkei. You have a tranquility which I think a lot of people absolutely love. It's slow paced. The driving to and from work and home is far less than those probably in bigger centres like the Cape Towns, Durbans and Gauteng. So just the lifestyle itself is less stressed. I think people in East London, I think they refer to them as being quite chilled, which is a word commonly used. And I think one of the challenges, I think, for schools is that there are a number of young families who are tending to move out of places like East London because of lack of opportunity, lack of business opportunities, and maybe just a concern with regards to the area we're in and the challenges that they might face. From an administration perspective, there tends to be a gravitation towards the west. And the only challenge with that really in the West is that they're going to become overcrowded at some stage. And there'll be more space for people staying in East London. But from a school's perspective, we are extremely blessed to have a large number of primary and high schools in East London that are top draw educating schools. And, you know, for any family coming to East London, you have the pick of some of the best schools in the country, whether you be a boy or a girl. And I think that's something where a lot of towns don't have. So for me, I think a lot of young families with young children tend to remain in East London because of that, because they know whichever school they go to, they're getting a top quality education for their children. And the challenge for, I suppose, most schools is how can they maintain their standards? How can they maintain their or progress in their educational methodologies to extend the learners so that they can then move into the world as best as possible? And I think that's probably the biggest challenge in East London, that these top schools maintain the standards that they have set or better them going forward.
Thank you, sir. Much appreciated.
Pleasure. I don't know if anybody else would like to add to that.
Yes, just to build on, Andrew, what you're saying, I think you have enough of a challenge running your school properly and appropriately in this day and age without having to work out how to look after your municipality. You know, Palmer virtuti, reward to the brave. The question really is, what does it mean to be brave as Selborne College in this day and age? And I think the opportunity of looking at that and doing some soul searching in the Jubilee year and then building on it is wonderful. And I really want to wish you strength with that.
Thank you very much, George. Much appreciated. Mr. Norman, sorry, you're on mute. Would you like to comment?
Right, Mr. Norman.
I'd just like to make a comment. I think we don't need to be so pessimistic about East London. For example, Buffalo City, which is the district we're in, was the top performing district in the province in the recent matric exams. Schools, not just in the city, but also in its peripheries, are improving all the time. And I think the quality of the pupils is as strong as it ever was. The street I live in was recently tarred by the municipality So I don't think it's all, we should be so pessimistic. East London has got a future.
I need Mr. Norman.
So, Mr. Jewett, there's another question that has come in. It's a question for George. Is Rhodes University a great place to work at? I only remember the InterVarsity Finds meetings, and that's from Jeanette Hensberg.
Rhodes University is a wonderful place to work, and I retired 2 years ago, by the way, so I've had 2 glorious years out of it, out of COVID, webinars, Zooms, etc., etc. But just to answer that as well, it's never a one-way thing. When you go to an institution, if you go to Rhodes University, you become Rhodes University. And it's no longer whether Rhodes treats you well, it's whether you become part of the community and contribute to a place that is worth being at.
And that was the last question. There aren't any other questions, Mr. Jewett. Thank you from my side.
Thank you very much, Loyiso. Gentlemen, if there's anything further that anybody would like to add, you have the floor. If there's nothing else, I'd like to again extend my sincere thanks to all of you for being part of this inaugural webinar, and one of 10 of our webinars for the year. I hope that you will join us as guests or as additional viewers in the next. And certainly to all those who have been on with us, we're looking forward to sharing the next 9 webinars with you going forward, which will be once a month. Let's hope that the year of our 150th is going to be a very successful one. And I do believe that after tonight's career webinar on education has been a great start. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your input. Thanks to all those who have posed some very pertinent questions in education. Loyiso, also for your technical support in the back end. Yeah, I think of saying enough now, we now call it to an end. Thank you, gents.
Thank you very much.